Yes.
Okay. Thank you for everyone for coming once again. This is really a big deal. It's wonderful that we celebrate the 4th of July in this district by having defense attorneys read the Declaration of Independence, as defense attorneys should, every year. And to honor the country and the Declaration and our independence, we're going to start out with one of the premier speakers in this district, John Lanahan, is number one. And then at the very end, you guys come forward with me, please. I'm going to ask everyone here to sit. We're all going to be reciting number 23 together. And in front of each one there, don't forget to honor the particular signer. So, John?
In Congress, July 4th, 1776. Unanimous Declaration of the 13 United States of America. John Adams, Samuel Adams, and Josiah Barton. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's gods entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation.
For Carter Braxton, Charles Carlton, and Samuel Chase, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are liberty, life, and the pursuit of happiness, to that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among the people, the government deriving their just powers from the consent of us, the governed.
For Abraham Clark, George Clymer, and William Ellery, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its power in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness.
For William Floyd, Benjamin Franklin, and Elbridge Gerry, purpose indeed will dictate that government long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience has shown that mankind are disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, yet to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed.
For Button Gwinnett, Lyman Hall, and John Hancock. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same objects, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security.
For Benjamin Harrison and John Hart, such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having a direct object, the establishment of an absolute tyranny over the states.
For Joseph Hughes and Thomas Hayward Jr. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation, until his assent should be obtained. And with so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attempt them.
For William Hooper, Stephen Hopkins, and Francis Hopkinson, he has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures.
For Thomas Jefferson and Francis Lightfoot Lee of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and for Samuel Huntington of Connecticut, he has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise. The state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and repulsions within.
For Richard Henry Lee, Francis Lewis, and Philip Livingston, he has endeavored to prevent the population of these states. For that purpose, obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to engage in their migrations hither, and raising conditions of the new appropriation of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers.
For Thomas Lynch Jr. and Thomas McKean, he has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount of payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance.
For Arthur Middleton and Lewis Morris, he has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislature. He has effected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power.
For Robert Morris and John Morton, he has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for ordering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent. For Thomas Nelson Jr. and William Packer,
for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies.
For Robert Treat Paine, John Penn, and George Reed, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us.
For Caesar Rodney, George Ross, and Benjamin Rush, he has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy of the head of a civilized nation.
For Edward Rutledge and Roger Sherman, he has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands.
For James Smith and Richard Stockton, he has excited domestic insurrections amongst us, and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers. Merciless Indian savages whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction to all ages, sexes, and conditions.
For Thomas Stone and George Taylor, in every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people.
For Matthew Thornton and George Walton, nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here.
For William Whipple and William Williams, we have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow those usurpations which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence.
For James Wilson and John Witherspoon, they too have been deaf to the voice of justice and content. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, and peace and praise.
Now, all together, we'll read the last one. Why don't you guys come forward? Number 23, of course, is the finish for Oliver Wolcott and George Wyeth. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these United Colonies are, and upright ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally resolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which the independent states may or might do. And for the support of this declaration, with your early and protection of divine providence, we mutually